It's Brandon, and this is.
Sierra. Hello, everyone.
So, welcome back to another episode of Still. Small Talk is Lame, kind of an acronym for our purpose around community connection around digital distances. And we actually thought to expand that in today's episode, which is going to be the counterfeit community, where we go further into individuality versus belonging. And then I was a little clever person and said conformity, because sometimes individuality and conformity can get convoluted in a community setting because everyone thinks that they're united, but are you really individual? And does you feel that way when you got there? Like, that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, so I think a good place for us to begin was, I would just say, like, what did you think the term individuality and conformity like define? Because you're the word person. I'm not the wordsmith, but you're the wordsmith.
So
Because I
I
use
think,
words wrong all the time.
that's all good. I think individuality speaks more to, well, obviously, individuality coming from individual and expression of self, essentially, right? That's what that word means, basically.
Yeah.
So expressing yourself as an individual, whereas conformity is sort of the top-down enforcement of here is a standard or a code or an ethic that people must adhere to as to be part of like whatever. Usually I feel like conformity always comes with an organization, whether that's school or a workplace or a culture, a religion, something like that, something organized, right? And conformity is top down in a sense, but everyone, usually it's voluntary, unless you're in it could be involuntary. Like, I guess you could argue maybe prison is not voluntary. Like things like that. There's conformity, right? And so
Right.
that was the biggest distinction. Top-down enforcement with voluntary acceptance versus individuality being just the expression of yourself and things that make you you.
I love how yours was like super serious. And I was like, yes, those are the key components of what I think those mean. But I was lightening up like conformity is being like that. But I keep forgetting that we had two different like adult, like academic like journeys. You were homeschooled and I had to go to like middle school and da da da. So my idea around conformity and individuality was as simple as like the clique that you were like, they're the cool people or they don't get beat up. So I need to like fit in where I get in. And that was why I was like, oh, maybe a lot of us, especially when we're talking about the community concept and like how we think the connection around community and maybe even the comprehension around it now should really start to understand like actually that's individuality or you guys are a group of conformists, if that's a word. um but yeah, that was kind of how I wanted to see the dialogue, because I was like, yeah, I've been a follower, not a leader before.
Yeah. So the example that you just mentioned, basically you were talking about cliques. I would argue
Hmm.
a clique is organized, right? A clique sort of unspoken, or I mean, maybe they might be unspoken, but they might be very obvious, right? A clique has certain things like you dress this way, or you act this way, or you do this thing, and that's why you're part of this organized group, however big or small it might be. And then if you are not voluntarily doing those things, you're obviously not in that clique. I would say that's still top-down enforcement with voluntary acceptance. And the only difference with the clique is I think there's usually people who start those. And the other half of it is they would have to agree to accept that person, assuming they meet that criteria. So it's the same. It sounds like serious or whatever, but if you break it down socially, I think it's pretty similar. I think we're on the same page.
This is why I wanted to bring it specifically to that thought process, because they are, in fact, they're explanatively different as far as like just like how we understood gender in our last episode. Um, I have it right here, and clearly, no technology is working for me today. This is the curse of our beginning a season at
Oh
the
my
fourth
God.
part, because I think last time the fourth episode we lost sound or footage or something like that. I was like, this is what we get right here.
Right. Oh my God, we did. How do you remember that? That's crazy.
Like I was like, because the curses are real. Okay, here is what I had found, and I'm sorry guys, I'm taking so long, but here. Okay, so around gender. Oh, never mind. This is where I got really dive into it. Because we go into gender and things like that. But yeah.
We
Oh,
could totally do that, but continue your point.
okay. So yeah, individuality represents the unique qualities, ideas, and expressions that define a person. It emphasizes freedom, self-expression, authenticity. People prioritize individuality, often value creativity, independence, growth, striving, and stand out rather than fit in. So that's individuality. Conformity is refers to aligning behavior and beliefs, actions with group norms, expectations, or standards. It often arises from the need to belong, harmony, safety in a collective setting. So one is literally sheep, the other one is literally wolf.
Well, I don't
If
know
that makes
about
sense.
wolf. I would say because I mean, individuality is not predatory. Wolves are predatory. That's the
Mm,
relationship between a sheep and a
that's,
wolf. But I,
okay, fair enough. Fair enough. That was a bad example.
yeah, like maybe herd versus animals who do not necessarily form a herd, right? Like, or maybe you could argue just it's a tough example to make, but I was gonna say maybe like a peacock
Yeah,
and a
because
flock of
one
sheep,
is just
like
yeah, because they're both birds, but one is like a bigger bird than the other bird, like or like a snake and a frog. You're both reptiles, but you're just clearly not the same. So that's kind of how I understand. That's when I started to say, oh, this is truly an imprinting of one's belief upon another, upon another, upon another. And I'm like, well, is that really conformity, or is that persuasion, or is it that is that manipulation? Is that dark psychology? There's all these things around it that when you affect or share or align with one person, because I think it always stems from one person's narrative that that alignment stands across, which is what creates those conformity kind of groups, don't you think?
well, I mean, maybe one person or group of people, or essentially it's an idea acting as a body, right? However many people are behind it, it doesn't really matter. I would say it's the majority or it's the loudest, most influential, something like that, you know. But the thing is, unless you're being part of a community where you're required to conform. Like, for instance, the first thing that comes to mind is when you go to a school and they have a school uniform. That's a rule,
Okay.
right? So conformity in that sense. Whereas if it's not rule or law or something like that, conformity's pretty like voluntary. Like you don't have to, you know, unless you just feel
Yeah.
so bogged down by social rules that they feel like law to you. That's different. But unless it's actually law or you're part of an organization that has rules that you must abide by, like wearing a uniform or something like that,
Mhm.
conformity is not required. So,
It's funny that you said that because I also had it give me benefits and then challenges. So one of the
mhm.
benefits of conformity is fosters social cohesion and unity, simplifies decision making by following established norms, i.e., unison, everybody looks the same, and then provides a sense of security and a shared purpose. You know, that's the key thing right there. Aligned and shared. It's like we can be aligned, but I don't have to share share all my cookie with you. We can be aligned that we both like sweets, but I don't like to give you this cookie. So that's
Yeah,
so I was
I
like,
mean, we agree
there's
on
a
that.
lot of contradicting things around conformity. Um, so, but do you agree with those benefits
The benefits
and
of, well,
conformity? Like those are pros.
yeah, the ones that you mentioned, I think when it comes to conformity, as long as you're okay with conforming to whatever thing we're trying to agree to right now, whatever the the top thing is, the organizing factor, the one voice, the group of people, whatever that is, if you want to conform to that and you get the cohesion that comes with it, that's positive, sure. But I again, that's like it's voluntary. Like I don't think we're in
Right.
disagreements here. Yeah.
No, no, I'm almost trying to say like, what is too much conformity before you're completely into a toxic like version of it, where you're completely
Oh,
omitting your sense of self and all that kind of stuff. That's where I was kind of getting to the point like when is your cap of like, okay, that's I'm not going to put on the pink, thanks. Like I can stop
okay.
at the conformity
Well,
to the pink or whatever, so to speak.
so my thing with that is in order to understand where the line is, you have to know where your own morals and values and ideals are. So if you don't know that about yourself and you end up self-sacrificing to the point where it's bad, like maybe you do it knowingly or unknowingly, right? That can get you in trouble. But I would argue, there's also things that could be made into law that shouldn't be in law, that just aren't constitutional. If that's the case, I would that in the appropriate manners, going through the government and whatnot. But if we're talking about everything that's just voluntary here, not actual like brick and mortar law, constitutional type things, the danger is if you don't know yourself and you have your own values lined out, that way you can tell like this organization, this thing I'm trying to conform with goes against my values. So I'm not going to do that. If you don't know that about yourself, that could be dangerous. Yeah.
No, it's funny that we literally bridged some of that from last week's last topic of like toxic communities. And like how you sometimes people wake up and be like, how did I get in such this toxic group? I'm like, you weren't self-aware until you got enough chutzpah to become aware into your own emotions, what felt good, what didn't, to then realize that this was not your jam. So as you go into counterfeit, because there's toxic and there's counterfeit. So I feel like people saying one thing and doing another, people existing as and becoming another. I feel like that's why I put one of the groups down that I did in our touch base. So I was like, it started like this, but it has now
Mhm.
become this. And during that story that you and your friend had, where she felt more facilitated with her belief system, when you were like, show me the Carfax on your belief of why you think that I should not be so valid with my opinion. It was, yeah, I was on a roll, guys, coming up with content. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's
Keep it coming.
that's
Keep
kind of
it
where
coming.
I've been. Um, yeah, I just because this idea of I feel like we both have lived in two separate areas of existence where we've had to do both, be individuals and be a part of the conformity, but still have a little resistance because I don't think I've ever tried to truly conform. Otherwise, I wouldn't be looking like a amazing, awesome person right now. So all I was really trying to do is like, where do you think that we see the balance of either one or the full separation embracing of either individuality or your conformity sense of selves?
Where do I see where there's a disconnect or like an overreach? Is that what you said?
I would say all three. Like, where do you see there's a balance of both? Where, like, what environment do you have to have a little bit of both, your individuality and you got to play along? Where do you see where I'm not playing along and that's fine? And then where you do say, I'm just going to be over here and that's just me.
Mm. Well, for me personally, obviously the military is like one huge conformity type deal. You
Yeah.
sign a contract, you have to wear the uniform, you have to have the standards for your um appearance, and then the physical
Hmm.
standards and the scheduling standards, like your schedule's not your own. You're at the beck and call of whatever branch you joined. Your housing is not even your own sometimes. Like that's all of that is conformity. But you can have some individuality within that. Like you can, I mean, your personality
Hmm.
is still your personality unless it's problematic. Some people have adjustment issues, and that's an interesting one to get into. Um, like
Yeah.
you have to be able to follow rules, and people who join the military that can't follow rules just because they have
All right.
issues with
Yeah.
integrity or whatever, that's like super niche, right? Those people have
Yeah.
problems everywhere in life, by the way, not just the military, but because everything in the military is regulated, they hit
Hmm.
walls with everywhere they look. So it's really tough for those people in particular. I would say, for me, as long as the rule is like justified and is reasonable, I had no issues following these rules. So the military was
And
easy for
that's,
me in a sense because of that.
yeah. Like, just like every time we talk about it, I'm like, I would have never made it through a day. Actually, I probably would have, because I would have tried to conform as much as I could, but then my cap would have happened. And I'd been like, that's it. I can't. Like, this is so cool, but no, not at this level of conformity. Um, I can honestly say I had a really silly, stupid example of what when I felt individual
Go for it.
versus conforming. So for the longest time, these, all this amazing shinery that you guys see in all of our seasons was not a thing. I wish I could. I may convince myself to send Sierra a photo of me back in the day, so you guys be like, that's not the person standing here before us. Um, and I really hesitated on a lot of that individuality and expression because of the conformity groups and communities I was in, because that was the aligned purpose. That was how everybody stayed safe or not in the spotlight, I guess, per se. And then as I got older, I just was like, okay, we're going to just do it this way. It's crazy how you kind of see those cycles in your life change. Like, oh my God, I really thought I was some individual, but I was like, no, it's just sheep. Did you see my little talk about like the sheep show? I was a part of the sheep show.
Well, the interesting thing is it sounds like you sort of um the thing I mentioned earlier where if social norms and things like that start to feel
Mhm.
like law rather than just maybe the average,
Statements?
you know what I mean? Like, just because
Okay.
most
Yeah.
people do it this way doesn't mean you have to. Like, there was no law governing the way that you dressed in that sense or, like, wanted to show your like, express yourself, but there were social things that made you feel a certain way as if they were law. Because you know what I mean? So, but it also at some point you sort of, like,
Yeah.
up and realized, "Actually, I can do what I want," and that and now
Right.
you're free.
But this wasn't ever a law. It was the yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's crazy that okay. I like to this is one of those things, but now I think we're getting so too individual. So in communities, where do you what kind of communities? I mean, I don't think I've ever come across a true conformed community and a true individual community because I feel like a group of individuals self-expressing themselves amongst a mass in a mass, I don't think that's something a little bit more powerful than like a conformed, structured, organized group. Do you agree?
Sorry, did you say that one would be more, effective than the other? Like, when you have a bunch of individuals in a
Well,
community, it wouldn't be as I didn't understand your question. Say it again.
oh, look, so how we broke down what like being your individuality versus your conformity. If you had a
Mhm.
group of people in their individuality, what kind of community sense and vibe would that be versus a group of conformity? What would that look like? Because technically, is there really a true balance, or is there going to be you're going to see more that are these are a bunch of individuals in their individuality? These are a bunch of people that are conforming to one aligned purpose.
Okay, can I challenge your question with the question? Because I think you're conflating
Yeah.
some things. So when you say conformity, are you talking about
Mhm.
alignment with a goal, or are you talking about conformity of other external things that don't necessarily have anything to do with the goal? Because you can have a bunch of
Well,
individuals in a community, and they're all aligned behind a
mhm,
purpose. And as long as they have the purpose in mind, they can be as individual as they want and bring to the table what they will and work towards the goal. So I think when you say conformity, the things that might come into your head might be, I might be wrong here, correct me if I'm wrong, but the conformity factors might be completely external and have nothing to do with the goal. Because that's what community is about, right? Is you have like an overarching goal that you're trying to complete. And
mhm.
however you get there is however you get there. But if you're working towards the goal, do the other factors matter?
I guess they don't, but when we talked about the toxicity within a community where either it's avoidable, it's catchable, it's spreadable, it's distributed, is it in those elements of individuality or conformity? Did that group become toxic because they were a bunch of individuals that all together they created this poison? Or did they all follow this aligned ideology, focus, goal, behavior, practice that created said environments or outcomes that were not, say, beneficial to their overall communities that works in people. That's what I was kind of taking it in those thought processes. That makes sense.
It doesn't, no. Because if
So
you
like,
have people working
okay,
towards a goal, like, I don't understand. It sounds like you're posing 2 different questions that aren't related to each other. I'm confused.
well, my understanding is community is a group of people gathering in a like-minded way, whether it's race, agenda, whatever. They all align in that. In
Mhm.
the ideas of individuality, I could still have, let's say, I only wear green, but my mindset is this. But that's what the community is calling for. There's no goal. There's just a social connection. Or I guess. Oh my god, I had the train of thought beforehand, but now I think since you've challenged it back, now it's like falling apart in the thought process. So
No,
Uh,
it's okay. I want to
maybe
understand where your original train of thought was. I think there's something to that. I think we're getting to something.
because in my thought process, there's a rhythm when you're in a community of individuals. Let's just say a running club versus a book club. A running club, usually that's a physical thing you have to do. The goal is physical, the outcome is physical. I think that's a little less conformity and a lot more individuality. To be among that community, you need to have a sense of individuality stronger than your sense of conformity, because you can't run like the woman who has been doing this for 20 years or the newbie. That's where I put those two alignments to kind of make sense. So
Well,
in another setting, yeah.
I think let's use
Okay.
the running example because that's really very black and white and easy to break down. I would say
Yeah.
if so, let's just say you're a newbie and you can only run a mile, and you join a running club that's like meant for people who are training for a 50K. Is that you being an
Yeah.
individual, or is that you not joining the right community? Like, you know what I
That's you
mean?
not being self-aware, as we told you to do before you joined these writing clubs.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I think that's what I'm getting at. You're talking about some external factors that kind of muddy the waters unnecessarily. Right. So
There's
if
skip
you have
steps, basically.
yeah, exactly. So if I'm trying to join a
Yeah.
running club, I need to know how much I'm trying to run, or at least, if I realize I'm in the wrong place, I need to get out because I mean, you could,
Yeah.
as a 1 miler, join the 50K club and get in there and do you and try. Like, that's amazing. I love that. That's fine. You could do that too. You could suffer and like do your things and just like push, right? That's okay too. Do what you want. But if you want to like incrementally work towards a goal, join a different club. Like, do either one, but just know where you are. You know what I
I
mean?
I like the latter part. I like the whole part that you just said, is saying if you are if you're only a 1 miler, go join that training for the 50K. I
Right.
feel like that's what a lot of people need to do nowadays. I think we do need to kind of take some elements of excitement and courage and activity. It's funny that I'm in this thought process because I have a client that lives in this ideology. Um, so I feel like it's infectious because now I'm like using it all the time. Like, I want to be more courageous. I'm like, oh my God, the Kool-Aid is in me. I am the Kool-Aid. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think before any type of community connection or commitments, you need to know what your commitments are. I wrote that in my notes too, saying if you're not self-aware, you can't figure out if you're going to be an individual or it can be conformed. Um, it's crazy
So
how this topic turns. Yeah.
yeah, real quick. I think so. Earlier, when I was like, I don't understand your question, let me try to like
Mhm.
phrase with the running example how I was viewing your question. So maybe you can understand why I was confused. So you got
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
running, you got a new member joining the running club, or sorry, you've got all these different members joining the running club. And then let's just say all these people are very individual. They don't, they don't have any kind of coordinated dress or anything. They're all different shapes and sizes and colors and creeds and whatever. And they all have different shoes. You were sort of
Right.
making it sound like they couldn't all run together because they're too individualistic.
Uh,
They were not able to, and I was confused. I was like, the goal is a running club.
got it. Got it.
Doesn't matter. Like, are you able? Like, you know what I mean? So that's why I was
Yeah.
confused. That's how your question kind of sounded to me. And I was just like, there's nothing wrong about being individualistic as long as you're pursuing the goal. The only problem would be is if your goals are not aligning properly. You're either gonna struggle, which is fine, or you can try to
Right.
go a different path. And like, do you see why I
Thrive.
was
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Conformity and individuality are not so black and white terms. They are like literally subterms of sub-tier terms, excuse me, of other sub-tier terms. So I feel like we took on a big bite of something that clearly needs to be eaten in smaller pieces. Um, but it's fun because I was gonna try to tackle some other areas, but I think this is more exciting because um, this is what I meant by that comment. Because due to lack of self alignment and individual expectations, my why can't be the why of the group because then I'm not an individual or conformed. I'm just labeled.
so you're saying,
Don't you think?
well, so I think this backs up to what we were just talking about. So
Yeah.
you're joining a community and you're saying that your why can't necessarily be the why because it like it won't fit. Like I guess that goes back to is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because we crack the code into like some of the faults and triggers that are in toxic communities. It's because people aren't becoming or checking in or understanding, comprehending, validating, claiming those values, purposes, and practices. And then you get into another obstacle of community groups, which is the counterfeit versions of them, where they
Mhm.
say they're all about hope and joy and da da da, and it's literally a bunch of people screaming at each other for 25 minutes. It's like,
Okay.
how did you? It's like these are. I feel like we're using this season as tools to prevent some of the crazy things that we've seen and experienced in communities. So I think
Mhm.
this is another one of those call and reminders is saying check in with the community within, check in with the sense of self within, because if you cannot, therefore you will attract toxic communities. You will create toxic communities. You will also set up counterfeit connections and communities that literally serve no purpose, that you're just perpetuating small talk continuously by these thought
Yeah. So
processes.
here's the deal, right? You are allowed to be as deluded and crazy and inconsistent and toxic as you want, but no one
Yeah.
is as long as it's, not we're not talking about law here, we're not talking about constitution, we're talking about voluntary communities, self-created communities, right? No one is
Yes.
required to participate in your bullshit. So if you say that you're
Right.
doing one thing, but then you're not actually doing it, people can vote with their feet and leave. And whether they call
Yeah.
you out
Oh, I
is one,
love.
you know. But like that's the true nature of it, right? So they can vote with their feet. And if you don't have enough awareness about yourself, like I'm just saying,
Hashtag everybody who's been watching this. That is now officially a still productions term. You can vote with your feet and leave.
no,
Look at that on a
no, no,
t-shirt.
no. That's not a still thing. People have been saying that for years. That's not like that phrase is not mine. I didn't make that up. That's a well-known phrase.
Okay. Well, it's like it's gonna be like a little. It's gonna be in a
But yeah,
hashtag today. I'm gonna tell you
facts.
that.
We could do that for sure. But it's not my phrase though, let's be clear. But yeah, vote with your feet. If you
I
don't
know.
like what's going on,
I,
leave.
it's so funny that why. Okay. Why is it every even numbered episode we always have a call to the carpet for B over here because I literally didn't realize I voted with my feet, but I sure as shit did, and then I did leave. So I just put in my vote, and now I can't you can't get a new ballot. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy that how that just kind of came together.
Mhm.
Um,
Is
yeah,
do you think
people
that
vote with your
addressed
feet.
what you're talking about
Um,
though?
it does, but again, I feel like it is such a multidimensional, several layered thing because we could
Mhm.
talk about this in what's happening now, what's happening, what's going to happen, what could have happened, all of those things, and the communities that are either changing, growing, or connecting because of those things. Um, and that's the whole idea of like in life right now as it is. I feel like I'm more of an individual than a conformist.
That's good. I think it should be that
I
way.
will stand. I will stand. Yeah. And that was funny. Like, do you think that there should be a series of conformist people, or people we all should be individuals, living in an individuality that makes sense to only us?
Well, no. See, I don't agree with what you just said at the end right there. I think we should be
Right.
individuals. Like, obviously, we are individuals. Not we should be. We are individuals. Everyone's unique and different in their own way. But uh, the conformity depends on the level in which we're speaking, right? I don't. I think at the highest level, we need to be conformed and
Mhm.
act accordingly within the laws of our country. And as long as you are within the
Yeah, of
law,
course.
free to do what you will. That's it. I think that is like the most level of conformity there should be, unless you choose to sort of subscribe or join a group or a community that requires something else. But again, that's voluntary. I think like the the
Well,
highest,
free will is voluntary.
huh?
I think, yeah, I feel like when you're like, choice is still voluntary, whether it's a good one or a bad one.
Yeah.
there's just effect and cause in all of it. So that's why I was like, law and life are two different things. I think I would say.
Well, I mean, why?
Oh well, because one has a clear footstop, the other one has rooms and groves and da da da.
Yeah, I would
Like
say
the laws.
within the law, you are free to do what you want. It sounds like we're in agreement here.
We are in
As long
agreement. Okay, never mind. I'm just trying to poke. I'm trying to poke holes in the strategy, and I was like, we're saying the same thing, but you just said it with a different, like a period, and I said it with an exclamation point.
yeah,
Neither here or
exactly.
there. This is what we do.
Mhm. But yeah, I like,
Um,
as long as you're, just conforming to what you should be, like, every country has different laws, the even the ni in the United States, the states have different laws. Stay legal,
mhm.
be a citizen, but be an individual within the law, and then have as much there's a ton of freedoms in the United States, you know what I mean? Like, we're one of the freest countries in the world.
Let's see. Now I'm like, oh, now I found the whole, I found the hook. So as a black gay person, once upon a time, you can either be both. That's individual. But how does one conform in those strict laws, legislations, and rules that can affect our individualities, practices, and perceptions? Based on your statement, because I was like, wait, there was a time where you could, like, women couldn't vote, but that was a law, but you were an individual. The women is a sense of your individuality. What happens when a community tries to recreate, readapt, or regurgitate, regenerate those kind of ideologies for the sake of their community building?
I mean, I would argue that's not law anymore, so why are we talking about it?
Mhm. No, I was just thinking the ideology of law, something of uh, cause, consequence, outcome, versus something that is chosen, and you just kind of deal with it because you chose it.
Are
You did it
you
versus you chose it.
I mean, if you're saying that, if you're trying to ask what do you do about if there's a law that is sort of like wrong that you think needs to get changed, let's put it just generally, then you go through the proper channels and you send your grievances to the government and you go through that democratically in a neutral way, right? But if we're talking about things that aren't law any like those things aren't part of law anymore as far as like women voting or like
Mm.
rights and whatnot. Like that's been settled. So I don't like what are you
I
either
guess I
get
guess my examples my I guess my examples yeah, I see what you mean. My
maybe
examples of individuality were too on the nose, and they were too time changed. We're not that kind of world anymore. We would have a show if we were that kind of world. Um, I guess I guess a better way for me to think about it is, when was the last time you had to take your individuality down to fit within a conform
never.
situation setting?
Well, I mean,
Ever?
okay, great. So I mean, I've had to wear a uniform before. I don't I don't consider that like but I chose to do that. I signed a contract and understood and read the terms and conditions and I knew I was for that. So I would argue
Mhm.
that's not losing my individuality at that point because I chose to do that. I understood and a uniform doesn't take away from who I am because my who I am doesn't change based off the clothes
Oh,
I'm wearing.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? So like I've never
Correct.
down from being an individual, conforming. I don't live that way. I'm always myself. I'm always an
Okay.
individual,
But
which is
I guess
not
that makes sense.
the
Just
average.
how
I know.
it's not the average, but it also is a sense of character and individuality because of that. Because you do not have that balance. They're not parallels. They are clear milestones and stops and starts. I would say for maybe other readers or listeners that are kind of like me, the big, like, emotional, sensitive. Oh my god, that was a complete sentence. I didn't know. Um, those kind of people that kind of go into those feelings of saying, what am I conforming externally versus internally? What am I individual internally versus externally? Because there's all these components of how we see, how we interpret, how we feel, that creates those urges to want to be in a community versus those urges to find the wrong community.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
where I was kind of taking it in those two sets.
there's some like nuance here. I was thinking while you were saying that, I was listening. I was like, okay, I guess there's some things that you could say I conform to that you would be able to identify as societal norms. But again, I am choosing to.
Mm-hmm.
I got married. People tend to talk about marriage
Yeah,
as a social norm or social construction. Whether you agree or disagree with that doesn't really matter. That's how it's perceived. I would say
true.
why, right? We can keep religion and secularism and like that can just set aside for a moment. I got married
Right.
and I get married, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be viewed a certain way, and that could be viewed as conforming to those sets of values. I don't think of it that way, though. I don't think when I'm getting married, I'm conforming to the standard. I don't think about that. I
Oh,
think about
yeah.
it as
I don't like that.
right. Okay. So I guess it sort of depends on like how are you viewing conformity? Because I am an individual in my marriage. I am me, but we are also one, me and my husband, right? So but we're not one as in a blob of like I don't have personality and sense of self anymore. We are one in a social familial context and financial and everything else. And we
Mm-hmm.
move together as one voluntarily because we love each other, but we are individuals and I don't change myself for my husband and vice versa. And that's where I think people get
Mm.
bogged down in this conformity. So if you sort of pull the principle out of that one, right? If you choose to be bogged down by
Yeah.
social norms, that's on you. But if you want to be an individual, express yourself still within things that
Yeah.
may or may not seem, you know what I'm trying to say?
No, I get what you're trying to say. I think it again, we are tying it back to the simple fact is to be in a community, you have to connect to your inner community. And that is what the skill, platform, and production, that's what we're trying to talk about, is because you see and hear all these nuances that we have literally uncovered and seen and broken. And we're like, that just looks like a big fat mess. Just know where you're supposed to be for yourself. Then you can start to connect it with other systems and other connections. But the first connection has to be to the source, which is yourself. And I feel like one of the things you have to think about is dealing with, are you conforming a lot or are you being your individual? And you need to start asking yourself, where do you thrive and live the most in those places? And are you happy in those places? That I think is the big dialogue and connect that I think why we wanted to go about counterfeit communities, because this is the kind of concept and kind of companies that they breed. And then I've come across those people like, really? Okay. All right. I thought you were a unicorn, but you are clearly like this weird muzzly saber tooth thing over there. So
Yeah.
enjoy. If that's how you see it, like great species, just not really what I was hoping for. Um, so that's what I kind of think about it in those when those terms. And I think with our 10 minutes left on the clock, we already covered like challenges and things like that. And I'm definitely not going to get into. We were going to talk about gender versus pronoun. That's going to eat up most. I mean, that could take us more than 10 minutes, but
Well, I mean, to be fair, we could state our stances if you'd like, and we can leave that as a cliffhanger for the
um,
next episode. But
I don't have a stance. I just seek to continuously try to strategize and understand that whole segment of life now, because I accept, I thrive, I lift up my non-binary, non-gender specific communities. I just want to feel like I'm still in it and not turning it into one thing, which is what it was, which is more autonomy and awareness and self-reflection and esteem amongst a group of people, to into something that we see many things turn into something that it shouldn't have been originally. So that's all I'm hoping that this doesn't turn into, because I start to see a lot of parroting in my days. Have
parroting
you?
like
It's used as convenience now, not as a real, like, personal, like,
mm,
innard. Like it's not meant internally anymore. It's like a way to be like, I'm different, but please conform to me looking different so I can fit in because I want to belong.
mhm. So, do you believe in? I mean, even like I hate this sentence so much. I don't like this sentence. Do you believe in pronouns as they exist now?
I
Because that's
believe in self-editing.
It's not grammatically
I don't even
correct. It's stupid.
correct. I like the power of specific self-identification. I like the fact that people can now finally own themselves as they are, how they are, and labeled as they wanted it to be, if the sake of labels had to kind of confine them. What I do find interesting is that there are parameters in its process that people seem to be like, well, it's but maybe I'm still figuring it out. It's like, the only time that it was okay was when somebody was like, I'm bisexual. Okay, well, talk to two roads, figure it out. Well, I used to believe that people couldn't be both. But I was like, no, you can legitimately have urges for both, but you can't be waking up today with a beard and tomorrow with a boob. Like, it just, I need you to recognize that those things have a hard placement in my heart. I love you all and respect it, but I've started to come across the beard Tuesday, the boob Thursday, and I'm like, what is
This is a
happening?
yeah. Hmm. Well, I think we should get into this more in our next
Yeah,
episode. Sounds like you
yeah.
sort of
What a cliffhanger.
you stated your stance
Yeah.
very, very like nicely and whatever. So I'll just say I don't believe in the pronoun bullshit. Um, I may or may not respect the choices. It sort of depends on how you've been interacting with me as an individual. If you've been rude, I mean that is what it is. I'm not into that stuff
Well,
law, like how Canada tried to do, and I didn't follow up and see if they succeeded with that. I don't remember. I'd have to check in on that. But
okay.
um, I also don't believe in the pronoun thing in general. It's you. There's two sexes, and that's it. And
Oh
so,
wow. Okay. I mean, I think this is a very good place for us to kind of leave everybody on because I believe, I guess, yeah. We see the world in a completely different spectrum, and I actually, I've learned and challenged myself because even in talking about this, I made a call to action being like, this is why in certain political agenda awarenesses ecosystems. Um, I was conformed because I only had a higher percentage of individuality, which was technically conformity, me trying to be like, ah, da, da, da.
right.
But I didn't listen and hear and had enough of the factual comparisons, narratives, and things like that to see it as a unbiased political process, which it is meant to be, or well, the epicenter of politics is supposed to be fairness, balance, da da da. So and for the people. Well, for the people can't be singular if you're trying to understand and play in the political party. But again, I like this. This was great. Of course, we now have two hot buttons to talk about next time we get on the air. But
Yeah.
please follow us and listen to us on all your favorite streaming channels. I think we got on Apple Podcasts recently. So thanks to Sierra and people that we have behind the scenes. And yeah. Oh, also, we have our Reddit page, which is still a work in progress, but check it out.
Yeah.
We'll put the links below and we'll talk to you soon.
Sweet. Have a good one, guys.